was a crazy time, but at the same time it was a good time because God was beginning to reveal himself in my life. And we ended up coming here to Juneau. One of the main reasons was to give the kids a break that were living with us, to give them kind of a new start. And we ended up at Juneau Christian Center, and nothing had changed as far as I was concerned. And then I was asked to teach that Bible Sunday school
Foundations.
class.
Foundation.
Foundations class, that was it, yeah. During this whole time, I was starting to learn about this whole grace thing. You guys have heard of Joseph Prince?
Oh, yes.
Well, I had back in about 1985, about 1990, about 1990, one of my friends said, "Hey, Chris, here's some tapes. Take a listen to them. This guy talks about some of the same stuff that you're talking about." This is 1985, 1990. I mean, we're talking a few years ago. And I said, "Well, where did you get these?" And they said, "Oh, some friends of ours were on vacation and they wandered into this church in Singapore. And it was a couple hundred people, and they just happened to wander in, and come to find out the pastor's name was Joseph Prince." I had no idea who this guy was. And I started listening to his tapes. And my background is I'd come out of a real legalistic type cult that were just totally, you obeyed the Ten Commandments, the law, everything was, you do this, this, and this in order to be pleasing in God's sight.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like you take a puzzle and you're trying to put it together, and I had about 40% of the puzzle I'd figured out, that there was, I got out of that and started looking at, renewing my mind. I was so brainwashed into this whole legalistic thing that it just sucked the very life of God pretty much out of me, but I had such a desire in me to know God, and so I began to learn a lot more, what the truth was and about God's grace. And then all of a sudden, this Joseph Prince starts coming into my life. When his church was only a couple hundred people, now it's over 20,000. And when I started listening to his tapes, it was like Japers. It just doubled the number of pieces in my puzzle that I was trying to figure out. And then I wrote to them. We just used to send them money, send them $100 or $200, and tell them, send us all the tapes that you can send us for this amount of money. We were just, bring it on. We got to hear more. And this is, like you say, in the late 80s and early 90s. And so we would get these tapes and we'd pass them around. There was 3 or 4 of us, Danny Thompson and Gary and the whole crew. And then I began to read books and hear other tapes, and it was all of a sudden, it was just like a rush. All of a sudden, instead of having 30% or 40% of the puzzle was fitting together, it was like 60 and 70%. It was just quadrupling. And so my foundation was beginning to change, and my whole outlook was starting to change, and that's when we moved here to Juneau and started teaching that class. And about that time, Kara comes down from Highland and is at the 3/4 house, and she shows up. Halfway house at the time. Was it halfway? And she starts coming, and then it was a couple of her friends who I actually knew. What's her name? One of the gals from Ketchikan that was also there with you.
Angie.
No, it was what's her name's daughter that was the dental gal.
Oh, Nicole.
Yeah. Yeah, and a few others, yeah. Anyway, so they started showing up, and then of course all the guys started showing up when they came, and the guys started showing up. So here I am looking out on a third of my class that are people that I totally despised, and you know, all tattooed out, and the whole works. And but after a while, I suddenly realized that, you know, these are people too, and God started changing my heart. Well, He had already started changing my heart, and then things really just started getting crazy, on how God just started moving in my life and started changing my whole thought pattern. That was the thing. It wasn't just you know, accepting these different people, but I was beginning my life, my mind was just changing in amazing ways. Things that I were totally against was changing 180 degrees. My whole perspective on, you know, convicted felons and drug addicts and homosexuals, and I mean it just people started. I was starting to. What was happening is when we accept Christ into our life, Jesus indwells us through His Holy Spirit, and the Bible tells us that we have the mind of Christ. And what was happening to me was, as I was starting to see people as Jesus sees people, and it was really brought home to me when I started going up to Lemon Creek, which I did not want to go. I did not want to go to Lemon Creek, but I was asked by Brian Ewing to kind of help him on these Saturday services. And I thought, well, what am I going to say? I don't know these people. I don't know anybody there, and what do I got to say, and all that. And I went up there the very first day. I go up, and I go in there, and I was feeling really nervous and out of place and just really sketchy about the whole deal. Didn't want to be there. And I go up and I'm, okay, well, at least I need to be friendly or something. And I go up and I say hi to this guy. Hi, my name is Chris Nelson. And the guy says, oh, hi, my name is Charlie Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
It was my grandkids' uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Right off the bat. And the next week, so I come up there, so I know one guy. And the next week I come up there, and Charlie pulls me off the side. He says, Chris, guess who's here? I says, well, who? And he says, well, Troy Smart. And I go, Troy Smart? Well, I knew his biological dad very well. I went to high school with him. He was a friend of my brother's. His stepdad, I worked years with over in Metlakatla, and I go, and I remember Kara and Sonia talking about him all the time, always in a very disparaging type manner, but I remember, and I met him when he was about this high, and I go, oh, wow, okay. I mean, I would never recognize him because of, you know, he'd grown up and everything. So Charlie's saying, hey, yeah, he just showed up here. And I said, okay, well, that's cool. And then they had a mail movement coming down the hallway there. And he said, well, there he is right there. I go, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, out of this group of guys, is this one single guy comes right in, makes a right-hand turn right into the chapel. And pretty much just walked over to me and said, well, hi, Chris, how you doing? And it was Troy Smart. He told me later, he says, I had no intention, absolutely no intention to come into the chapel that day. But he says I just ended up there. And from that point on, right after that, I had started my own Bible study, and he never missed a meeting. There's almost 3 years there.
Mm-hmm.
I got to visit with him down in Metlakatla several months ago. As far as I know, he's doing very well. And we just had a great time. He became a friend. I can't even imagine that happening, but he convicted felon, and he became a friend. And yeah. But the day that it really, I knew that God had changed my heart, one of the things that I was always fearful of, well, there was two things that I was really fearful of. Number one, speaking in front of women by myself, a group of women, not to mention convicted felon women in jail. I mean, and the other one was how do I deal with guys who have molested babies or sexual offenders? That was the other thing. I mean, I wrestled with that. I'd be awake